So leaders who operate from a place of trust, the leader who does not know that that's what they're doing because they haven't actually sat down and realized that, their teams are entirely oriented from a managerial, do I trust or do I not trust? And when they get put in the not trust bucket, they are like in jail with the key thrown out the window, except they don't know it.
Yes.
And I remember talking to someone who was a trust leader who ended up leaving the organization under difficult circumstances and talking to HR. And they were like, I could never understand what's going on. We were talking promotions or performance improvement plans, and it switched every quarter. So their binary sword is trust. And if they don't know it, they can't communicate it. But let's pretend they know it and they did this work and they read Bob's book and they took the course, they talked to me. And what they would do is they would go to their team and they would say, hey, Dov and Mary and Steve, I am a trust person. Trust is really important to me as a leader. Here are the ways trust gets broken. You're 5 minutes late to a meeting. I can't find you on a Tuesday. And if you feel disconnection or pulling away, like there may have been a breakdown in trust and you should come talk to me because trust is really important to me. That's the difference between driving the wheel and being the student driver where someone else has the wheel on the other side of it.
Here's something to get curious about. Do values matter? Of course they do. You know they do. But what are real values? How would you know if the values that are guiding your leadership journey are actually yours, are real and authentic, or if they're just slogans that you've somehow adopted? You see, what I'm asking is your values compass really pointing to your true north? Or is it spinning you in circles? Welcome to the Dov Baron Show. Come for the stories, stay for the learning. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I advise high-performing leaders and organizations how to harness their emotional source code to transform their tribe. Today's conversation isn't about values posters on the wall. It's about values as a living compass, a compass that decides whether your partners, your work, your community are lifting up your heart, your soul, and your mind. Or are they slowly draining you until you abandon yourself? Our guest knows this terrain very well. Robert, known as Bob Glazer, is the founder of Acceleration Partners. He's the host of the esteemed Elevate podcast. He's a TEDx speaker, a columnist for HBR, Forbes, Inc., and Fast Company. And he's one of the rare leaders who not only talks culture, but has won the Glassdoor Top CEOs for Best Company Cultures. Bob Glazer is the voice behind Forward Fridays, which is read by almost 200,000 people in over 100 countries. But here's why he's with us today. Not to tell you that values matter, you already know that. But to press us to go deeper, to really examine what values are. You see, according to Bob Glazer, most of us are driving through life like we're in a sports car, in a pitch black tunnel, bouncing off the walls, wondering why it hurts. But he says when you uncover your true values, they become the yellow lines that guide you through the tunnel, helping you to make the most significant decisions in your life with clarity and with courage. That's the heart of the compass within. If you came for comfort, well, this episode's going to make you itch. If you came with courage and curiosity, you're in the right place. You're tuned into the Dov Baron Show, where deep thinkers come to sharpen their edge. Dear listener, turn up the volume and help me to welcome best-selling author of many books, including Elevate, and his new book, The Compass Within, Robert Bob Glazer. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you for having me. And I use my sports car analogy. That's my favorite one from the book.
That's where I got it from. I got it from the book.
You picked well.
Well, I think that, it's a good metaphor because it's easy to understand. Because actually, when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I remember this trip I took and the electrics went out in the car.
Yeah.
And it was back before cars had so many chips and I had no headlights. And I'm driving down this long, dark country road on the peninsula in British Columbia with no lights, trying to catch up to the car in front of me and use their headlights. And I must have freaked them the hell out because obviously I'm too close to them, but not knowing where I'm going.
Yeah, and as I said in that analogy, you'll probably get through the tunnel, but your car is going to look like crap because you're going to drift into the wall. You'll pull back and be like, oh, I don't want to go that direction. You go the other direction. And so a lot of us, we'll get into the nitty gritty of this, but we know our values when they're crossed. We know when we're out of line, it doesn't feel good. The problem is we don't have the wording or the clarity to avoid the wall before we hit it.
No. Well, you say that the compass will never mislead you if your values are true. you and I have talked about this in other conversations. Most people confuse these sort of aspirational slogans with actual values, and they don't actually know the difference, in my opinion. They've not done enough self-examination, self-work to actually know what they are. So for you, when have you personally discovered that the values you thought you had were actually performative or borrowed from others? And how did that misidentification cost you?
Yeah. So my story starts in 2013 when I was invited to a very exclusive leadership event with Entrepreneurs Organization with about 22 people from all around the world. It was a 5-day leadership training. I was like, great, we're going to learn all this stuff. I'm going to come back with these tactics, how to lead people, all this stuff. And the first 2 days were just this giant mirror, which was kind of like, who are you and what do you value? What I actually realized over those 5 days was like, I thought I was a very values-oriented person, but if you asked me if I could tell you what they were, I would, like most people, I would random a bunch of things. I'd say integrity or family or things that I've come to understand don't really help you. And this thing was a little like Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek, but he did this book like Discover Your Why, and everyone's like, yeah. And then I want to do this. Now find your why. It's not that easy.
No.
So I was like, I'm very values-driven. I have a strong feeling this has been sort of my problem, like not being able to figure out this lane. And I had a modicum of success, but I went and spent 6 months, figured out my values. Everything I thought was a keyword list. I'm like, this doesn't feel like it. This doesn't feel like values that I could be actionable or make decision on. So I went through kind of all of the pain, built a process, figured out for myself. It was like 2 years ago when someone was reading my bio, like you might have done for speaking event. And I was like, everything they just said came after that moment in 2013. So I went and changed my business. I changed how I was leading, how I was a father and friends and all those things. It just became so clear to me, like, this is my lane. This is what I want. This is what they are. But one word values would never do that for you. So I think I was someone in that struggle of like, I feel very values oriented, but they can't help me if I can't articulate it.
I think that's the challenge, like you and I talked about before, is that I think that most leaders believe they're values driven.
Yeah.
And they'll come up with words like integrity or something. And it's like, oh my God.
Which doesn't work as a company value either.
Well, no. And I'll also say to somebody very simply, and this is my question around values with everybody, is what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, do as you say and say as you do. All right. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, you've not really dug into it. It feels right, and I'll give them that. It feels right, and they know they're connected to it, but they don't know actually why. And I really like that in the book you go into the process of why. But let's go here. How do you separate authentic values from the ones that we believe about ourselves? From a social science point of view, psychology, there's a lot of values we take on that are not ours, but they feel like they should be. And as a result, we don't question them.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I think you need to identify what they are. And one of the tests for that is like, think about where it came from. So I found that most people, when you really get down to their values, they are either doubling down on something that was very important to them in formative years, or they are running 180 degrees away. When someone tells me a very specific, I'm like, let me ask you, like, where does that come from? Inevitably, it's one of those stories. And so that's what we have to understand. So let's talk about a high level.
Sure.
My definition is core values are the non-negotiable principles that guide your behavior and decisions. So you could have something that sounds hokey, like you said, or do what you say and say what you do. For some people, that wouldn't mean anything. For other people, there might be a version of that that's pretty damn serious. To use an example, they had a preacher father who told them all of these things, and then they found out that he was doing all of the other. And so for them, that became an orienting thing in life that like you need to say what you do. And so for someone else, it's a punchline, but if they can connect that back. So these values are intrinsic, they're consistent, they're not aspirational. So they're different from company. So company values would be like the shared bubbles between a whole bunch of people. Like, what is the common thing when we're on the outside? This isn't just me. So this is me, and what are the bubbles that sort of sit around me? To really have values that are operationalized, they need to be in a way that you can make decisions on them and that they're really clear what they mean. And I've never met a single word core value that sort of beats that test. And similarly, like integrity in a business is a pay for play value, like it's a table stakes thing, like we expect that. I have at least 6 definitions of integrity that I've heard. So what is it that it means to you? And when you actually start getting into that, you start getting closer to the real answer and what is actually important to them.
You know what I find interesting about this is what I just said earlier, that I don't think that people will have done enough internal work, self-examination, to get to real values. And when somebody tells me this is a value, and then I really look at not only their emotional intelligence, but their emotional maturity, the work they've done on themselves, oftentimes it's very clear to me that this is not a value because, in my opinion, and again, correct me if I'm wrong from your point of view, I have no problem with that whatsoever. You can't get to your values without understanding the emotional depth of who you are, because your values inherently, real values, your authentic values, are emotionally governed. They come from emotional impact.
Deep. They're deep.
Right.
And again, having done this work now for 10 years, I am not a therapist, but I can't tell you how many times when someone really locked into a value or a value like trust, we can spend a lot of time on trust and what this looks like in leaders, but they have a value of trusting relationships. And I will say to them, because I've done the why work too around trust, I'm not going to ask you what it is, Dov, or whatever, but like, you seem to have value of trust. Did someone violate your trust early in your childhood? And inevitably a tear rolls down their face or they clench up or they turn ashen white. And I'm like, look, I don't need to know what it is. We're not litigating the past, but we're on the right path here. And so you have to understand, and this one, let's dive into this a little bit because I have some direct experience with this and it's interesting. So leaders who operate from a place of trust, the leader who does not know that that's what they're doing because they haven't actually sat down and realized that, their teams are entirely oriented from a managerial, do I trust or do I not trust? And when they get put in the not trust bucket, they are like in jail with the key thrown out the window, except they don't know it.
Yes.
And I remember talking to someone who was a trust leader who ended up leaving the organization under difficult circumstances and talking to HR. And they were like, I could never understand what's going on. We were talking promotions or performance improvement plans, and it switched every quarter. So their binary sword is trust. And if they don't know it, they can't communicate it. But let's pretend they know it and they did this work and they read Bob's book and they took the course, they talked to me. And what they would do is they would go to their team and they would say, hey, Dov and Mary and Steve, I am a trust person. Trust is really important to me as a leader. Here are the ways trust gets broken. You're 5 minutes late to a meeting. I can't find you on a Tuesday. And if you feel disconnection or pulling away, like there may have been a breakdown in trust and you should come talk to me because trust is really important to me. That's the difference between driving the wheel and being the student driver where someone else has the wheel on the other side of it. And when I've seen these leaders do this work and they get excited about it and they go back to their teams and they're like, this is who I am. This is how I lead. This is how I show up. Like I'm giving you my playbook.
Yeah, I think that that's so important. Like what you just laid out there is that when you understand it, you can relay it to people and it takes everybody out of the guessing game.
Right. Why doesn't this person like me? Do they not like my work? No, your assignment was 10 minutes late and they don't think they can trust you. And for someone like this, that trust is like a 5-alarm fire for them. You come 5 minutes late to my meeting and you're like, I solved the equation on the wall. I'm like, awesome. Like, I don't care. I was probably 5 minutes late too. It doesn't create that deep sense of like something is wrong here with me. You come to me like, look, there's no way we can make this better. Those are like fighting words for me.
And I think that that's the other thing too. You use a term that I use that is not used a lot, which is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
I use this term all the time. Like, what's non-negotiable? And they go this and there's this. And I go, well, what if that happened? And they go, well, you know, and see, it's not non-negotiable because you went, well, you know. Because it's like non-negotiable is non-negotiable.
If you ever ask a true trust person, and this is the test that I use because I learned over time, if someone violates their trust, are they dead to you? And the non-trust people are like, well, it depends on what they did. The trust people all go totally dead to me. It's just totally dead. Can't come back from it. That is non-negotiable. And look, you had a lot of leaders and people who understand at their core that would have died for their values. Give me freedom or give me depth. We used to have people who would take that pretty far.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation because, again, it's very much personal, non-negotiable. And then you take it into the organization and there's another level of it there.
Yeah.
And because maybe it's not just my values, but it's a collective values of maybe the C-suite or maybe of the board or maybe of the person who's the founder. And then there's how do we take that into the culture and what we're doing inside of there.
Yeah.
But I don't think it can start unless someone, quote, at the top, and by the top, it might mean of your department, says this is my value, because we're all people dealing with people.
Right.
And what you've presented is a way to have clarity about who I'm actually dealing with.
Right. You are trying to find places in your life, and we talk about the big three in the book, where you are aligned. So if you get super clarity on your values, you're going to be able to look at your company and say, look, they don't need to rhyme, but they need to be in harmony. How well do I align to either the stated values of the organization or the actual values of the organization, which may not be the same? And it can provide a lot of clarity there for like, oh, this is not where I should be, or my values align to what it says on the wall, but that's not what people are rewarding on a day-to-day basis here.
No, and I think by fixing this inner compass that you talk about, I think it allows people to make decisions. And I think, honestly, from a psychology point of view, I think that's why people don't do real values work. It's because they can fluff it themselves. They can sort of skate around it and say, well, it's kind of like this. Hold on a second. Is this a value for you or not? Well, if you're negotiating, it's not.
Well, let's go to the most common one I hear a lot, family, which I tell everyone I don't think it's a value. Because one of the definitions is these values should show up the same way in all aspects of your life. You don't have work values and personal values and friend values. If it's non-negotiable, it's non-negotiable. So people say family is a value. Okay, I get family is a priority. Tell me about family. What is it about family? And I might hear one person who talks about something, it's really trust. This is a group of people I can trust. Well, that's the same person who has the small group of people they can trust in the workplace and operates. Okay, good for you to know. Family means trust. Someone else, it might be, it's about presence, right? They had a parent who was never around, so they are determined to be. By the way, they are going to be a presence-oriented leader. I am going to be there. Family doesn't help you at work. Figure out what it is that underlies family, and I promise you it's the same thing for your friendships, and it's the same thing for your leadership. And when we first did this work with our leaders at our company, and I was like, wow, this really helps. They were like, what do you mean? Like, we're doing a half day on our personal core values, not the company values? And I was like, yeah, look, we do all this leadership training stuff. Jim Collins talks about level 5 leadership, like the pinnacle of leadership. I like that framework. There are a bunch of different ones. Deep sense of self-awareness. If you don't understand who you are and what you value, I don't think you can be this sort of leader. And so I'm not telling you our organization has one type of leader. I am telling you, Sarah, you are going to lead the best if you can understand this stuff and go with it. We had someone else who did this work at our company. Self-awareness is a really critical core value for me. Why? Turns out she had a parent constantly said the wrong thing when she was younger, like just embarrassed her whole life. So what was this person doing as a leader? Anyone on her team that showed any lack of self-awareness, she was like all over them. And the irony of this whole story was she didn't realize this until she went through this process and then was like, oh my God, I have been like crushing my team if I sense any sense of self-awareness, and it has been sort of disproportional. And so she went back and told them all of this. So this stuff shows up in the workplace. I can't tell you how many times I've seen two adults fighting over something. So there's a real story. This guy is fighting over the budget with this woman. She has a core value of include all perspectives and does not feel heard. And he has a core value of do not waste. He grew up in poverty, and it was like you held on to everything. And this budget is not about the budget. He thinks she's being wasteful, and she thinks he's not listening to her.
It's fascinating because values at the base level are psychology. One of the reasons I really like the book and what you laid out at the end about how to sort of find your way through this path was it is a self-awareness process. And why I say that is because this is my language, not yours, just so everybody's clear, is every human being is hurting. We're all in some kind of pain. We may or may not be aware of that pain, and we're all trying to feel better. We may not be aware of the process of trying to feel better, but we're all trying to feel better. And so that person snapping your head off is snapping your head off because they're in some kind of pain about something. And oftentimes it's a lack of communication because I don't know myself well enough to know how to communicate. So when you say a value of self-awareness, by the way, as you just pointed out, Bob, can have a very different meaning to me than it has to you. But when you say that, I automatically know you have pain there, and that pain is going to make you hypervigilant. It's going to create a level of awareness that might be a 10 when it needs to be a 3. And there might be an overreactive.
Your radar around those issues, your antennas go up 10 feet more than the next person.
And that's why this is so important in a self-discovery process. And this is why you need great coaches and great therapists and people who can help you and mentors. Because the truth of the matter is, my opinion, you can't fully get there on your own. When Bob sits down with you and guides you through this process, even in his courses, you're going to be answering questions that you probably wouldn't think of because your mind is going to, it's going to want to sort of sidestep. Well, I don't want to quite go to that. We'll take a little veer to the left on this one. So this is when I say self-awareness. I also say that to have real self-awareness takes, this is my opinion again, takes real courage.
Yes.
And it takes one of my values, which is deep, profound curiosity.
And so I'll give you the test, because one of the tests of my values, my frameworks, is that the opposite drives you crazy.
Exactly.
I always say, you're at a cocktail party, I start talking to someone, and the guy he's shallow, and he's talking about crypto, and he's telling you everything's great. Like, you just want to punch this guy in the face, because he's the opposite of what you value.
Exactly. And that's the other thing, is that the irritation is
innate.
It's innate, but it's also important in a level of self-awareness because it may be making you aware of your value because it's the opposite.
It's the single best test.
Exactly.
And I force it. And when someone thinks something is a value, I create the opposite archetype and I throw it at them. And then this person walks up to you at a cocktail party. And when I can do it for all 4 of their values, when I'm thinking fast enough, they're like, oh, like the look on their face is like,
get me the hell away from this.
Because this person is like the living embodiment of the antithesis of their values. So when a value crosses does not feel good, it is a great test. The opposite test is a really good test of if it is a value. Probably one of the best ones, yeah.
Let's sort of pick that up for a minute, because you describe dissonance as sort of draining or corrosive, but some leaders swear that innovation lies in the tension. Have you ever seen a situation where there's a values clash and that somehow on purpose that produces better results? Or do you believe that dissonance is always destructive?
No, I think like in a relationship, in a boss, in an organization, let's say these are our 4 points, my 4 fingers are sort of 4 points of values. We should have disconnection in a bunch of places, but we should generally be on the same page. If it was like magnets and the 4 were opposite, that's going to be just painful. And I did this work with a leader recently who was going through a divorce. And after we got done with 2 of their core values, they said, oh my God. And I was like, what? And they said, my ex is the opposite of these 2 values. And I said, that would be very hard. And some things aren't bad. Obviously, the opposite of integrity is not good. But look, one of my core values is long-term orientation. I married my wife, met when we were 17. I've liked playing the long game. I've always played the long game on things and thought about that. It's not that live in the moment people are bad or whatever. Now, there's a manifestation of this. I meet people who are clearly doing a trade or something that's just short-term focused that's going to have collateral long-term damage. It's not that that's bad. But if I married someone, it's not my dominant core value, but if that was my dominant core value, like long-term orientation, and I managed someone who was like live for today, man, that's going to be a lot. Every day I'm trying to save and they're like, let's spend everything. There's no tomorrow. That's going to be really hard. That's a lot of like rubbing.
Yeah. So I can see that. And again, it brings me back to the last point, which is I don't believe that people marry people like them. We usually marry people who are not like us, not in every way, but in some ways. And the reason for that dissonance is to make us aware. It's like, oh, yeah, you know what? So for instance, my missus, you can throw her into chaos and she will organize it. I am the master of creating chaos for her, which doesn't bode well. And I'm aware of that because of my entrepreneurial spirit, because of my creativity, because of my curiosity. I can juggle a lot of things. And she is the person who makes all the lists.
Right.
That's not a bad thing if we learn that that's not who I am and I'm not going to change you. So one of the things that we did very early on as a relationship is we made a commitment that I will never try and change you. And that's both sides. I'm never going to try and change you, but I want to know who you want to be. And I will always challenge you to step into that. There's no like, well, this is who I am and I'm stuck. No, This is who you are and you're evolving, but those things of your evolution may not be completely in resonance with me as in the same height of value. But the core, which is what you're talking about, and this is what I want people to get, is the core has to be around the same thing.
I agree 200%. And I didn't understand this when I was 20 in terms of, as you said, most people, if you've been in groups and personality tests and stuff, and whether it's DISC, they marry the opposite. As you said, there's some harmony. So my wife and I are very different activities. There are a lot of surface things, how we handle things, but like we always agree on the big stuff. That's the thing. We talk about the kids and living and the community, and we very rarely think, or someone will be like, this person's amazing. And I'm like, they're a criminal. We have similar. And so that's the stuff we confuse, the sort of preferences and activities and things and personality. You come together on the big stuff. We've never not been in agreement on the big stuff. And you said something before I want to go back to, because I think it's super important about hurt. The difference between the work I've done on I ran a professional services firm for 20 years. So I'm like 1 degree away from being a therapist anyway, because I've never talked about anything with anyone that isn't a people problem.
Yeah, of course.
I've never had a machine break. I've never had it's customer people, partner people, client people. But most people's purpose lies very close to their pain. It comes from that pain, right?
Absolutely.
They were super lonely, and so they started a world-renowned after school. Like, there's a lot of good that comes out of that. And while I totally respect therapists, and I love therapists, and people, we talk about this stuff in the workplace. This is my point. At 30, 40, 50 years old, you are a fully baked human, or unless they really want to change, is not going to change. So I don't need to go litigate why this happened or if it happened. I just need you to understand that this is showing up today for you in your leadership, in your work, and otherwise. And either you can be aware of that and operate with that knowledge, or it can kind of run the show for you.
But I think that that's the argument that people don't understand, is that I was originally trained 150 years ago to be a Jungian therapist.
Yeah.
And when people ask me, can you recommend a therapist? It's very difficult for me to find one that I can recommend, because it's not, as you said, it's not about litigating the past, but understanding this.
And that's too much of what the industry has become. Who do we go blame for what happened
as
to us?
Opposed to understanding something so that I can understand what's driving my behavior. This is me, literally. My dad punched me in the face at 9 months old. Not a good thing. Is that traumatic? Absolutely. Should I go punch my dad in the face? Well, I've wanted to, but he's dead, so we'll let that go. But the truth of the matter is that I notice, like I was a boxer as well in later years, like if they got close to my face, it was such a powerful discipline for me to learn to not close my eyes.
Yeah.
As a boxer, you have to keep your eyes open when a punch comes to you. And my brother boxed with me. It didn't happen to him. He was great at keeping his eyes open. He could dodge the punch. I, on the other hand, would close my eyes and get punched in the head. There are behaviors and there are belief systems that come out of those things. Understanding it gives you a place of personal responsibility to say, you know what? I can do something else here. There's another way of going about this. I understand that it's driven by this, but it doesn't have to be the determiner. Again, there's a compass directing, but it doesn't have to be, well, I don't actually have to go that way, because that may be a compass that's a false compass. It's pointing magnetic north versus true north, and those are different things.
So my wife and I have done the why framework too. And it's funny, I joke, I've done a lot of work with Gary Sanchez, who sort of made the archetypes. And you might have even had him on your podcast at some point. But I have a very better way orientation, and my wife has a right way orientation. And these are super incompatible at times, but we've learned to communicate it. She will be like, I made our plans for this weekend and everything. Please do not make it better. Just leave it. And I'm like, okay. And, similarly with her, I was like, I can see she's struggling with something and it's not significant. And I'm like, look, there is no right decision there. I just need you to make a choice. This is just a simple, like, do we want Chinese food or pizza? Like, no one's going to die.
Right.
So we are not going to change each other. It is a point of friction for us. But until we had that language and that awareness, I think we had a lot more fights around that stuff, because she's like, why don't you appreciate me? I just planned this trip. And I'm like, because my nature and everything wants to like, just make it a little bit better.
Just tweak
like
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, let's take that all bit. Why do I want to make it better? In one of my opening speeches, let me show you the report cards that told me for 7 years in a row that we don't think he's living up to his capability. It became very important to me to do things better. And it all ties back.
Of course. Bob, we're already at the end of part 1 of the show. It's been a fabulous conversation so far, so thank you very much. And I want to make sure that people know how to find you before they click on to part 2. So tell people where they can find out more about you, about your book, about podcasts, or any other resources that you have.
Sure. So everything is at robertglazer.com. Actually, if you go to robertglazer.com/6, and we'll probably talk about this on the second episode, it talks about the 6 questions from the book that start this kind of process. For people who are still not sold on the whole thing, I'm like, have a cup of coffee, answer these 6 questions, and see what comes out for you. So robertglazer.com/6, the book Compass Within. If you go to compass-within.com or go on my website too, we're giving the course that comes with the book to everyone who buys the book through launch week. You can always find it wherever you're sold, but go on the website, put in the order number, and get the course, because that provides a little of the scaffolding from the book around kind of how to coach you through the process.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We're going to be back in just one click for more of our delicious conversation with Bob Glazer. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Bob Glazer. He's the founder of Acceleration Partners. He's the host of the esteemed Elevate podcast. He's a TEDx speaker, columnist for HBR, Forbes, Inc., and Fast Company. Probably never heard of him. Anyway, he's one of the rare leaders who not only talks about culture, but has won Glassdoor's top CEOs for best company cultures. He's the voice behind Friday Forward, which is read in 100 countries by nearly 200,000 people. And his new book, which is absolutely phenomenal, read it last week, is called The Compass Within. And it's really talking about values. And in part 1 of the show, we talked about how so often people think they have the values. You, I, any of us can think we know what our values are, but we don't really know what our values are, or we've not really examined deep enough what our values are. And the importance of doing that, not just because somebody said it's important, but the impact of it. And we're going to get more into that in a minute. But where I want to jump back in here is we've talked about values, and I want to talk about how do we find our values? What's the way for someone to go through that? In the book, you lay out the 6 questions. Can we go into that? Because I know that you have that as part of your website and people can go find out more about that. But let's dive into that.
Yeah, what we didn't talk about before, I mentioned, the book is actually a parable. So it shows you a character going through these challenges. He meets a mentor, he's coached, and the whole values discovery process is sort of embedded in the story. And then it's shown explicit to you after the story's over. Some people learn by reading a manual, others need to see it. And so the book's a little bit strategy. But yeah, it really starts with, as it does with a character, these 6 behavioral-based questions. And what they're designed to do is to pull out these past memories of things that worked really well, things that people come to you for, things that didn't work well, work environments you didn't like, and do it in 6 discrete pieces of paper and answers. And this is the thing, again, if you don't want to do the whole process, great. But I found that when people sit down and do this, people have posted their results on LinkedIn. It's always really cool, with a note and a coffee. I didn't realize, respect, I listed 6 times across all of these pieces of paper. Clearly, something going on with that with me. So basically, this induces all of the raw material out. And then the exercise is sort of a kill and combine of looking at the themes. The questions are all designed to get the same answers in different ways. So you then start to group those themes together, pull them together. And the key thing, and I think the real differentiator in my process, is this thing called the core validator, which says you got to run each of these themes through 4 questions. The first 2 questions are, is it the right theme to begin with? Because don't worry about the cool name if it's not the right thing. And then the last 2 is can you get a phrase that really brings it home for you and helps you make decisions? So the first question is, can you use it to make a decision, past or present? That's super important. Is it worded in a way that you can make a decision on? Since I think that's the most important thing about core values.
So when you say it, going into the mind of the listener, viewer here.
Yeah.
So the it is what I wrote as what I think is a value.
I grouped a bunch of these words together into a theme, and I wrote a working thing on this theme. Let's just say it's really important to tell the truth. Could I use that to make a decision? Yes. I know that I'm being asked to lie in this situation, or I know to be told the truth, right? That's a threshold thing. If I said perseverance, or if I said family, Can I use that to make a decision? How do I make a work decision with family? So universally, it's got to apply as a decision-making rubric.
I see. So that's part one. So we've written a statement about.
I've answered these 6 questions. I have 6 pieces of paper. And ideally, I would take like a colored marker and I'd do red. And I'd be like, what are all the same things across the 6 that are red? Okay, this looks like theme 1. Each question might have multiple answers. It might say, tell me about environments where you did your best work. What was it about the environment? So that might induce a bunch of different things. So I take group 2, I circle blue, and now I have my kind of red page and keywords, and I have my blue page and keywords. And now I'm going to kind of like, what is this subject that we're talking about? Okay, my core value is long-term orientation, one of them. It might look like thinking of the long term or something like that as a working title. So then again, can I use this theme to make a decision? And then we talked before, the second question is, when I imagine the opposite of it, does it really strike a nerve? Is the opposite of it something I really can't stand?
I think that's really important because it may not be your language, but I think that every value has a shadow.
Yes.
There's a shadow side to it. And the shadow side to it is those things that really irritate, that just piss you off. It's coming from that other side of this thing, which is, again, linked to the accountability of the pain you experienced that's driving the value. I think that people want to avoid that. And that's something you actually need to look at and go, yeah, I'm not looking at dragging my mother into court for how she was with me as a child, but if I can understand that that's driving this, that's why it drives me nuts when it happens in the opposite way. But again, that self-awareness and even self-honesty to say, listen, this just bugs the shit out of me. We can get into the details of why it bugs the shit out of me, but you just got to know this is a line that is really non-negotiable for me. That allows people to go, oh, I get it.
Yeah, there was a leader that we did this work with, and it's very important to be able to make sense of things for her. So again, if I said, well, the opposite of that, if someone tells you a bunch of things that may not be true or whatever, and well, it doesn't matter otherwise. But in this case, she basically had a fanatical mother who was a conspiracy theorist who told her things her whole life that just weren't true or that couldn't be proven. This is super interesting because I said to her, people on your team better not come with theories. They better come with data. And she said 100%. So you understand, like, this is someone who was told a lot of things that were not true. And when she got old enough to realize that they were all lies. So that opposite test, is this a nice to have for you, or is this really important to have?
So can we go to this from another angle? And the other angle is this. What if I'm working with somebody who's above me?
Yeah.
So I'm a senior person, but there's an executive above me who I'm pretty sure, because I did Bob's thing and I went through the thing, I'm pretty sure I know what mine are.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that I can work out what the person above me's is because of their behavior, but they control my paycheck.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that?
So that's a great example. As I said before, I would go to a team and I would say, if I manage them, if I managed up, I would say, hey, look, this will tell you what kind of boss you have. Trust. I would say, hey, boss, you know what? Trust is really important to me. And I need to know that you trust me. And if you ever don't trust me or trust has been lost, I really appreciate if you can come and let me know that. Let's say it's include all perspectives. That's someone of value on our team. I love that because I know what that means. I know exactly what I would never want to ask them to do. And be like, look, this is one of my values. I really like projects and stuff where I'm able to go synthesize others' perspectives and market research and come back and give you good data. I don't love stuff where I got to do stuff unilaterally without talking to people. In theory, if you have a good leader, it should help them.
Proviso.
It should help them to play to your strengths. If they don't give a shit about you or any of this, then it's not going to matter.
Yeah, this is the other thing. Again, we're back to self-awareness because there are many leaders, and you and I both know this, there are many leaders who are leading without any self-awareness, and they're old school leaders. They're not leading. It's power and control. They've lacked that self-awareness. And again, if you know your core values and you've really dug into those, you need to be so clear that they are non-negotiable. I think this is where the challenge might lie, is that if you understand that these are non-negotiable, you may be in the wrong place.
Yeah, and I have a couple thoughts on this. One, we all wake up or have dreams, those of us who don't work for ourselves, of our Jerry Maguire moment of dropping the shit and walking out of the office and I'm going to do my things. But we got bills to pay and kids to feed. And I understand you can't have that world. So what happens if you're very clear that you are in a company or a leader that is diametrically opposed to all of your values? You are going to feel horrible about yourself from one or two ways. One, you're going to be going against these values all day long and running up and clashing with them. Or two, you are going to suppress what you care about most in order to survive there, in which case it'll work, but then it's almost like a thing where like it just causes a major eruption one day because you're like, okay, I'm going to just deal with a person who lies when that is a core. One day it's going to explode. It's not great options. When I wrote my book, How to End 2 Weeks Notice, I talked about the reverse of this, that the worst employees are the ones that quit and stay. Not the ones that quit and leave. They're the ones that decided 9 months ago they're quitting. What you should say is, this place does not fit my values. I understand why I'm upset. This feels horrible. I have kids and food to put on the table. So I am quitting and I am looking for another job now, but I am not going to leave until I've taken care of those responsibilities. We can live with dissonance in the short term, but I think you can live with it if you've resolved in your mind that actually my value maybe is to take care of those that are closest to me. And so my boss's is not, but by staying in this job and making sure that I can keep my son in private school and not ruin his life, that's important to me. I actually can align myself in the short term and get through this, but I'm making the decision knowingly that this is not where I want to be, and I'm going to start work to get out of here.
So that brings us to this core evaluation that you talked about. Talk to us about that. How do we actually evaluate?
If we finish the last two themes of the validator, so the first was, as we said, can you use it to make a decision past or present when you imagine the opposite? The second two are getting to like the packaging around it. So is it a phrase rather than a word? And can I objectively rate myself on it? This last one is what's wrong with every core value in a company. Could I put it on the quarterly review and sit down with Dov and have a conversation? It doesn't sound ridiculous. I fought with a company years ago and some corporate core values. We have a core value of celebrating diversity. I'm like, you're never going to be like, you did not celebrate diversity in our meeting yet. That's just as awkward. So again, they probably had a value of include all perspectives, which is basically celebrating diversity. But I pushed them back on that because can you objectively rate yourself on it? So that's the last test. So if you have those four, then I think that that's valid. If it doesn't meet those four, I call those sort of unvalidated. That's a lot of the family, integrity, persistence. But when you hear values like your words need to match your actions, and another one of my values, respectful authenticity, or include all perspectives, or maintain mental and physical discipline, you'll see that these sound totally different. Like, so let's take maintain mental and physical discipline, run it across that test. Can I use it to make a decision? Absolutely. Can I imagine the opposite? Absolutely. Is it more than a word? And can I objectively rate myself on it? Can I look at myself and be like, I've been doing great against this the last 30 days or not? Yes. After COVID, one of my values is long-term orientation. I was always the guy in my business. I had an operator who ran the day-to-day. I was always focused on the next 6 to 12 months. In the year or two after COVID, with all the ups and downs in our industry and back and forth, every board meeting was chaos and different. We just couldn't operate for more than a 30 or 60 day window. That was just the way the world was. And I realized I was so miserable because that's not how I like to orient. I had to operate in sort of crisis now mode. And I'm really good at long-term strategic what is next modes. I would have been able to say like, no, I'm not operating in this 80% of the time. And that's why I'm feeling really frustrated right now.
So how do we take this into an organization? You've just gone through this, which is really wonderful a way to evaluate it. But in a company, coming up with those values might be, well, Charlie thinks it's this, and Bob thinks it's that, and Susan thinks it's this, and Mary thinks it's that. There's all these different perspectives on this. How do we bring that together as a corporate set of core values? Otherwise, we might end up like, Enron, with a bunch of values on the wall that
integrity, respect,
which mean absolutely nothing.
The actual values at Enron were take huge risks, stab others in the back. Like these were the things that got you a big bonus at Enron. So really importantly, because I think people get lost in this distinction, and you have a lot of great leaders that listen to your show. If we were not, then this would all be lost on people. The work of company core values is very different than this work. People use the validator, they'd be better off. So a company figuring out its values has to do that. And if you want to reach out, we do projects for people all over the world on that. It's a very different process because that's about what do all of these people have in common that they're here for and what are the things they hold dear. What happens is I have a lot of teams that take it together because a leader will do it. They will figure out their value and they will kind of realize, a great leader should be like, I'm in the job of building better leaders. And this is a great way to make people better at their own leadership. And so they'll do it with a team and they'll help each of their team figure out their own values. It's up to the people then to figure out whether those values match the company's values. And maybe they do themselves a favor if they do or if they don't. But these things are really distinct. One is all about you and the other is about a collective. And again, you shouldn't expect that these things would be the same, but they should rhyme. In fact, we have a core value in our company called Excel and Improve. We want people who are driven by excellence and they're improvers and they're lifelong learners. And as I've done a lot of people's core values over the year, over 100 leaders, I'd say 80% of them had some value around improvement. We did our jobs right in the interview process. We found people for whom getting better is a core thing that they want to do. And that was clearly a match for our company. So while they are discrete and totally different projects, one is done on an individual basis, one is done with a team. The end product in any good organization should want both. They should want great company core values, and they should want people who are super clear on their personal values so that they're comfortable as self-aware leaders in the organization.
So let me push back a little bit on that, Bob, because I think that most companies, in my opinion, don't really know what their values are.
I also agree with that.
They put shit on the wall like we talked about or in a brochure. They don't actually know what they're about. And so it's difficult for even somebody who's done this process and who's got a sense of their own values. They can only go off what they're seeing in the organization. But if I own or run a company and I'm part of the executive team in a company and I want to get to our core values, that's a completely different process.
Totally different process. There are some similar things in terms of the validator, but how you get there is a very different process. In fact, I'll give you a purview into what we do. We just did it for a large hospital system. They've totally changed their behavior. The happiest email I had ever gotten, I posted about this because I always say, look, we can do this work and it won't mean anything if you don't operationalize it. And we have 6 points of operationalization in the organization. I got this email from this large hospital system. I was like, how's it going with the values? And they sent me these 8 bullets. I'm going to get some of them wrong, but they were like, core values have been added as behavioral-based questions to our interviews. Core value awards have been instituted, and we have our first ones next month. We have a core value shout-outs that we instituted in our newsletter. We have a Living Our Core Values series that's going on the website. I was like so happy. And they showed me the examples and the people that were nominated. And I was like, that is how you align what you're saying. First, you get the right things down. And I was like, you guys are a teaching hospital and you have nothing about helping make other people better. And that's basically what one of their core values ended up. It was like, lift while you rise. And I was like, this is a teaching hospital. This is core to what you do. And they were pushing it for the first time into performance evaluation. So interestingly, hospitals have all these politics around, it doesn't affect the doctor part of your job, but this was going to affect who got administrator roles and principals and all this stuff. So there's a different process. What I end up doing is I ask a different set of questions to people and I compare all the answers. But I really want to know, what about their peers? What are the behaviors of their peers that they really, really admire? And what are the behaviors of the people that didn't work out and got fired and didn't work? What were the core things that they did and said? And the values live in that. And in a company, I end up going to the leadership and saying, look, there's often a say-do gap. There's some things that you're saying and you're not doing, and you got to fix that. Everyone agreed that that is a value and that is what they value in their peers and whatever. You're just not enforcing it. You're saying merit is what matters, and then they can see tons of favoritism or whatever. But sometimes there's a value, maybe like Enron, that's deeply embedded in the organization, but they're not saying it. And so we talked to them about elevating that thing that people feel into something that's said. But said does not mean, oh, we got the stencil and we put them on the wall. In the book, Jamie knew that his core values didn't align with the company's, not because of what was on the wall, but because of the behavior of his manager and the leaders.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think there's a great challenge with this inside organizations.
This is so hard, Dov, because people come to me and I'm like, look, it will only change if the leader or the people on the executive team want it to change, and otherwise it won't change. What I love a project is when a new leader comes in who believes deeply in this stuff and is like, look, we're going to redo it. They want to own it. A lot of times, and I did a project last year, it was a company that had 3 or 4 acquisitions and some different people, and it had gotten lost. And they were like, between these acquisitions, they're like, we need to upgrade it. But these were top-down decisions. When someone comes up to me after I speak about this at a conference, I'm a mid-tier manager at my company, and how do I get them to change our culture and our values? And I'm like, I'm sorry, dude.
Minus 500, Alex. Not happening.
You might need a new job. And it was really uncomfortable when it was the guy's dad was the founder of the company.
Well, I do a lot of work with multi-generational families, and that's one of the things I've found is that very often there's a values difference between one generation and the next. And when you ask the present generation, why haven't you handed it over? And the answer is, well, they're not ready. And the truth of the matter is, it's not they're not ready, it's they're not me. That's actually what it means.
And the part to tie this all together, I just did the values for someone who, interestingly, was in a family business. And I was telling him about most of these are for or against. He was like, holy shit, all 4 of my values are like against. You might have all this, someone grew up in a family business and never spoke to their mother about anything other than business. They have like a church and state value of how they want family and whatever to be. And so the mother's like, well, you don't want to talk about this at the tables. They might have actually, the way they developed was a direct result of that experience to the opposite. So then of course the parent doesn't feel like they're ready.
I know you've got some stats. How does this impact at a real sort of meat and potatoes level in an organization?
Great point. We did it backwards because I'm giving you the proof after all this discussion. There's some interesting stats. So almost half of the employees in the US and the UK said they're considering leaving their company because it doesn't exemplify their personal values, which is in line with Gen Z. Gallup did something that said that employees who perceive a strong alignment between their values and those of the organization are actually 56% more engaged in their work. Wow. So feeling like what they're doing personally is tied to that, more engaged. If you tie engagement to performance, that's pretty huge. One of my interesting ones is that leaders who talk about and then live by their values, I assume there's a negative 90 quotient if they talk about it, don't, but they are perceived as 3 times more trustworthy by teams. So think about all these companies trying to fix problems. Would fixing trust in your organization be a good thing? Would having people 3 times more trustworthiness in their leaders, what do we think that would do for the organization? And then the last one was, I think it's about 40% higher life satisfaction if they have identified their values and feel that they're living congruously with them.
This is profoundly important individually, collectively, corporately. I think it's somewhat timely because, as you know, Bob, I write a lot about the political environment and what's going on. And not from a point of view of these people are bad and these people are good, but from the psychology of what's going on. And I think that a lot of what happened in a post-pandemic world is people didn't know their values. They thought they had their values. The world got tipped on its tits and people didn't know what was going on. And they went and clung to something to find a place to fit in rather than belong. As a result, they have adopted a set of values that may not be their own. And this is going to challenge people to look deeper and say, well, is this my affiliation? I have many friends, good friends, people I love and trust, who are very smart people who have been lifelong liberals who voted for Donald Trump. And I'm like, okay, tell me why. Not you're wrong or you're right, but I'm trying to understand the value system that put that in place. And in fact, the value system is exactly the same as when they voted for Obama. It's exactly the same.
I 500% agree. We are where we are right now because people have lost the anchoring of their values. They are incredibly tribal, particularly kids who haven't formed them maybe in their 20s, 30s are being pulled into things that are incongruous, like causes and stuff. These people seek harm to you. Like they're so dysregulated because they don't have this sort of anchoring point. And like I said, if someone said to me, I voted for Donald Trump because I believe in the truth, I would be like, all right, you and I don't have the same definition of the truth. But as you said, I've deeply listened to people. I believe in these things, and this set of policies is closer to those things than this set of policies. Everyone wants to just judge the book by its cover, but you got to look at the depth behind it, but I am shocked at how many people today are totally unmoored, are supporting things that make no sense. They say, I care about love and people and treating people nice, except those people. Like, you don't even see that you're getting manipulated.
But again, I don't know how you can see that if you don't know what anchors you, if you don't know what your values, your meaning, your purpose is. And that's where this becomes a huge challenge. As we're sort of coming to the end here, I want to ask you, from your point of view, from what you've learned, what is the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to examine their values?
I think you'll like this answer since I know your value now, but I think it's lacking the depth. I think it's the shallow wanting to get to the pretty answer. And to me, it's the depth. It's when you have, as Jamie did, that visceral childhood memory of that moment and realize that's why that bugs me. And it just is what it is. Again, we're not litigating it, but this is why, I'm doubling down on my dad was so good at this and I've tried so hard to be as good at it. It's so important to me. Or my dad sucked at this and I've tried my whole, like, when you add the depth and you connect the dots, this is called values and this is called values, but they're like different sports when you add the depth to it. And sometimes people are surprised I throw around, I was a gross underachiever and it killed me and I spent the next 2 years overachieving. I know I say it very casually, but I've done a lot of thinking and a lot of work about that. And that was a real source of pain for me, but I've come to just understand it. So I think the mistake they made is looking for the easy answer and not the real answer.
Yeah, I think people look for the easy answer or the feel good answer. And actually the values are going to come out of the feel shit place often because you got to step into the pain. A lot of my work is around your purpose is buried in your pain. That's where you're going to find your purpose. Your values are in there too. Those things are aligned.
And you said that this is important, right? They sit close together. So
Yes.
like the fact that your pain created your purpose has probably done amazing things for the world.
Yeah, but I also think that if you haven't done that work, then you've created a set of values based on an identity that's not your own. So the false values are supporting you being something you should be versus who you actually are. And that's a massive wake-up call in the work that I do in the emotional source code work with people. It's like, oh my God, yes, I've been doing this. That's not who I am. No.
When people figure out their values and they take the stencil, they go look, they're like, holy, it all makes sense to me. It all makes sense to me now.
Always been there.
Yeah.
Bob, we got to finish up the show. It's been a pleasure and honor, sir. Always is. I loved having our chats. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know you're on the road and I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
I want people to make sure they can find out more about you, your podcast, your books. You've got so many resources. Please let people know where they can find out more about all those.
Yeah, you can go to robertglazer.com, go to robertglazer.com/6, SIX, and you can get those 6 questions in case you didn't write them down or we were talking about some of them. And Compass Within should be on sale or pre-order, compass-within.com. On that page, if you just buy the book wherever you want and put in the order number, we'll send you the whole Core Values course for free through launch week. And that's about 10 times the cost of the book. So it seems like a good deal. I want people to do this work. My motivation in BHAG now is to help 1 million people figure out their core values. So we really just want as many people to dive into this work. So you can just take those 6 questions and see where it goes.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you to listen, remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of their tribe. Leaders who are committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior. Seem to have been talking about that. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe. Because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is that you tuned in from. Do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe to the show because it makes a huge difference. And we want to send out a big thank you to you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about your real values. What is that inner compass within you? Really, have you checked to find out whether the values that you are espousing are actually yours? Or did you take them on? Were they given to you by somebody else? If they did, that's okay, but maybe that's not how you want to live. And maybe that's the point of contention within you, that point of feeling like something's off is maybe because your values aren't matched who you are. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you in tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.